This is Akashvani. In the weekly program Current Affairs, we now bring you a discussion on government's efforts for rapid growth of digital economy. The participants are Maithili Bhusnurmat, economic analyst, and Dr. Pavan Dugal, IT expert. Moderator Arjun J. Chowdhury.
I'm joined by Ms. Maithili Bhusnurmat, who's an economic expert, and Sri Pavan Dugal, who is an eminent advocate with the Supreme Court of India. So a warm welcome to both of you on this program where we will discuss on the government's efforts for a rapid growth of the digital economy. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Arjun.
Maithili, let's begin with you. How do you see the digital economy, giving a boost to tax collection? How do you see the tax collection improve as a result of the digitization of the payment system, both direct taxes and indirect taxes?
Arjun, I'm a big enthusiast of the digital economy. In fact, I think the impact of that goes much beyond increasing the tax GDP ratio, whether it is of direct or indirect. It's actually the word that is used is digital revolution. And it truly is a revolution. I would think that the shift to a digital economy, a paperless economy, is almost as dramatic, if not as dramatic, as a shift from the barter economy to a one based on paper currency. So I think the whole idea of government's, program called a Digital India program, this has been a flagship program of the government of India. And over the past few years, particularly post-COVID, which actually, every dark cloud has some silver lining. So though COVID was such a terrible experience for the entire world, in India particularly, the poor really suffered. The big spurt that it gave to digital payments was a silver lining, as a result of which I think we've truly transformed every aspect of economic interaction between government and citizens, between business and citizens. So I think it's not just tax. Certainly tax has helped dramatically because the entire use of technology, digitization, in fact, the very fact that you no longer have to, anybody who's gone through the business of filing the income tax returns. Now, half the return is already done for you because information is all available. So this has all been possible because of technology. And in that, I think digitization has been a very major key element, which is why I think the rest of the world has now been taking the India's experience and expertise. This is one area where the rest of the world actually learns from India. Unified Payments Interface, UPI, BHIM, IMPS. There are so many variants, what is possible. And ONDC, that small businesses can now have a platform. So I think it's truly a revolution. And tax GDP ratio, since you mentioned that, I think the improvement that we've seen in the tax GDP ratio is perhaps, you cannot say it's entirely because of the digitization, but certainly a significant part of it has been because of digitization. Because not only does it become easier for people to pay taxes, it becomes easier for government to find out who the defaulters are, go after them. There also is a very clear audit trail. So the benefits of digitization, I think, are far too many for us to really confine it to just tax alone. Though tax, of course, is very, very important because the government didn't get tax revenue. How would they spend? How would they roll out all the kind of services they are doing? So let me stop over here and tell you, yes, this is truly a revolution.
So yes, clearly tax collection is very important, especially for the fiscal economy. And speaking about tax to GDP ratio, we have an estimate for 2024-25 where it's expected to be 11.7% of the gross domestic productivity of the economy. And the GST collection has also gone up for the month of January to 1,72,129 crore rupees, which is a 10.4% year-on-year growth. So clearly, there has been a great impetus. We have seen a rise in tax collections, the ease with which the system has been put up. But for the benefit of our listeners who have tuned in to this program, how do you see the benefit to the fiscal economy? Because we're looking at revenue, we're looking at expenditure of the government, especially towards public goods.
No, I would in fact look at the impact of the digital economy, as you said, on both sides, both on the revenue as well as expenditure. We've touched on the revenue aspect by talking about how the tax to GDP ratio has increased dramatically, partly, of course, because of GST, because it leaves a clear audit trail, partly because of digitization, which has now made it much easier for people to, even for the honest taxpayer to comply, for the government to go after those people who are not paying their taxes. So much greater audit trails are possible. As far as revenue is concerned, there is no end to, how much the government can garner through digitization. And let's not forget, it's not just tax to GDP ratio. Look at something like FASTag. Remember, it was not so long ago that people would not want to pay their money at the toll booths. And they would, invariably, periodically, you would read about somebody not paying. There would be shootouts at the toll booths. Some poor toll collector would be shot. and people were not willing to pay. And it would take such a long time. Despite all this, you still had cars piling up at the toll booths. Today, thanks to FASTag, literally sail through. Your tax, whatever the toll is automatically debited from your account through the FASTag, and the toll collections have increased dramatically. And all this money is then plowed back to build better roads, better highways. In fact, the kind of highways we now have in the country, 10 lane, 12 lanes, are very common on the national highway. So this, I think, all this has been possible because the digitization has made it possible, made it easier. So revenues are not just tax revenues, it's also in terms of user charges. So that is as far as revenue is concerned. As far as expenditure is concerned, it was not so long ago that there was that famous quote by our former Prime Minister that how a very minuscule portion, whatever government gives to its citizens, ultimately reaches the beneficiary. Today, the leakage is virtually gone, whether it is government pensions, whether it is scholarships, whether it is credit to elderly women and women beneficiaries, thanks to the ability of what we call the JAM Trinity. The Jan Dhan Yojana, the Aadhaar-linked identification, and the mobile telephony. Government can now transfer, funds directly from government sources to the beneficiary. There is no leakage whatsoever. And it can also target it and send it, like typically government is now able to transfer these benefits to women, because it has been found, studies have repeatedly found that if you transfer money to women, the family as a whole benefits. Whereas, pardon my saying this, Arjun, if you transfer to the man, typically the man uses either to smoke or to drink, and the family does not benefit. I'm saying typically, so my apologies to you. But so government is able to do all these. So on the revenue side, there's an increase in revenue. On the expenditure side, you stop the leakage. So in terms of, cutting back on expenditure and increasing your revenue, it's a win-win situation. So all this has really been possible through the digital revolution, the Digital India campaign. And that was government's really one of the flagship programs. You wanted to make India a digitally empowered economy. Faceless, paperless, cashless. If you become faceless, there is little scope for corruption. If you become paperless, there's also a cost. See, every time the Reserve Bank of India issues currency notes, there is a cost entailed to that. There's a cost of printing, you need security paper, the shelf life is limited. So there's, you become faceless, you become paperless, you become cashless. It really is a win-win situation. I think the downsides are so few and the upsides are so many, which is why I think India has become a poster boy, you could say, for the rest of the world, including advanced countries, with the kind of progress that we've made with our digital economy.
So literally a direct benefit transfer, DBT, is transmitting benefits of the economy to the person that is intended as a trustee of the electorate. Next up, Maithili, I would like to ask you is you mentioned about the impact on the fiscal economy, revenue, and the expenditure side. It is also allowed for easier access to capital. How do you see startup capital and venture capital really benefit from this type of digitization under the Digital India program?
The government's Digital India program, the success of this must, in fact, the credit must go to the Reserve Bank of India. Because the Reserve Bank of India with the government has really partnered the government to kind of lead this initiative. Because ultimately, at the end of any transaction, any economic transaction, there must be a secure payment interface. The secure payment interface is possible through the NPCI. So the NPCI was set up by the Reserve Bank and some banks. In fact, the number of shareholders has been steadily increasing. So now you have the NPCI, which has in fact come up with things like UPI, as I mentioned, the Unified Payment Interface. And you also have a lot of credit programs, which the RBI is very proud of. They have some credit light programs, as a result of which you can, pre-sanction loans, and especially for small loans, which banks, the kind of paperwork that is involved, etc., is no longer necessary. So there have been a number of new programs, I think, which the Reserve Bank has launched. And recently, in fact, is talking something like conversational payments, because in our country where literacy is still not 100%, there are parts of the country, especially in Eastern and Central India, where literacy leaves much to be desired. So you can have things like conversational payments backed by artificial intelligence, where people just need to speak. So you have a number of applications of this kind of digital currency, not only as far as deposit and withdrawal is concerned, but also in terms of what are the kind of credit products that you can give as far as small producers are concerned, small manufacturers are concerned, small businessmen are concerned, the SMEs, the really small MSMEs. So for them, there will be these credit lending initiatives, products, which they can take because of digitization, which makes it unnecessary for them to go through that lengthy paperwork that would otherwise have to go if they have to go through the regular banking channel. Because a lot of the information about them is available. You have credit scores, you have a CIBIL score. So thanks to all that It's much easier for banks also to pre-sanction credit lines. And that makes the entire process much easier, much cleaner, much more transparent.
So we're talking about the National Payments Corporation of India that you mentioned,
Yes,
NPCI,
yes, NPC,
and of
yes.
course, the loan apps, the payment apps that are available, that are safe and secure, that are vetted by the Reserve Bank of India. We also have the role of the Ministry of Science and Information Technology to make digi-payments safe and secure for the benefit of the consumer.
Yes, in fact, the MeitY is the Ministry of Electronics and IT. They have been, really leading this campaign in order to have cashless transactions. The idea really is to have, enable every citizen, small trader, merchant, promote digital payments because that makes it much easier. He doesn't have to carry cash. He doesn't have the worry about the cash being stolen. And at the same time, it's secure. And for the government also, it is very good because a large number of small traders who are actually not all that small in terms of their turnover. Now, when you have this kind of digitization, and everybody, even the person who earlier did not want to pay tax, now prefers the convenience of going through digital payments. So it's a win-win situation, as I said, whether it is loan applications, whether it is routine transactions, whether it is having transparency, whether it is speed, security, all these, I think the benefits are really manifold.
So we're seeing a twofold approach here, both in terms of facilitating the money market and at the same time making it secure from the legal standpoint. To what extent, you mentioned about how important it is that the digitization has created a revolution. Let me put this question to Pawan Duggal. So Pawan, we were talking about digitization and its benefits with Maithili. You saw the economic side of it. Let's have a look at what the legal side is. How do you see this benefit the economy in terms of keeping a check on tax evasion, tax avoidance, reducing the impact of the black economy and Benami transactions?
Well, the digital march of the Indian nation has been indeed remarkable, and it has got n number of new advantages than disadvantages. The coming of COVID-19 has now seen a magical increase in the number of digital users in India, but clearly from a legal standpoint, these digital users have to be immensely coming up under a broad enabling legal framework. So when I go ahead and make my payments online, or when I actually do transactions online, it's not just about convenience, it's also about the legality of these transactions. This is so thanks to the government already coming up with a new law known as the Information Technology Act 2000, which has been amended in 2008, which has provided a legal framework for promoting electronic commerce and electronic governance in the country. In addition, the government has also been coming up with various other laws so as to go ahead and populate the legal framework that will be applicable in the context of the digital economy. We specifically find that we have now not just the Aadhaar Act, we also have now the Telecommunications Act, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. So all these legal frameworks have been put up so as to further facilitate not just the growth of the Indian digital nation, but also to provide effective remedies to various digital stakeholders and also stipulate their rights, duties, and obligations. So going forward, the digital format is the only format that's going to be of primary importance. And in a scenario like this, I think the legal frameworks have to be updated and beefed up far more. Why? Because people have now extensively started using artificial intelligence, including generative artificial intelligence for a variety of their activities, but the legal frameworks in that regard is missing. Also, the issues pertaining to protection of online privacy is another missing chunk in the ecosystem. This is despite the Supreme Court having already declared that all Indians have a fundamental right to privacy under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, under the right to life. So the government has been doing a lot of work. It's come up with the IT Rules 2021. They have been amended as late as 6th of April 2023. The government is now already conceptualizing and developing a new Digital India Law or a Digital India Act, which is going to go ahead and not just come up with new frameworks for promoting the digital economy, but also for the purposes of going ahead and even coming up with a chapter on artificial intelligence. So all said and done, we've done a good job, but yes, much more needs to be done. Our fight against cybercrime needs to be far more enhanced.
Pawan, just giving it some perspective, we have, according to estimates, about 800 crore transactions per day. This is the data based on January 2023, and it's estimated that it will go up to 1 billion transactions per day by 2026-27, those using UPI, the Unified Payments Interface. So how does our IT system actually handle this type of bulk movement of money?
We have in place very robust IT systems. The beauty is that not only are these IT systems located within governmental ecosystem, but also in the private ecosystem. So a number of critical information infrastructure are being shared by both the private sector and the public sector. So all said and done, we have done enough, but we need to do far more. This is so because of the requirements of this 140 crore population and because of the hopes and aspirations of this new generation who only wants to live, eat, sleep, and even do perspectives digitally. So we've done enough, but we need to constantly keep on doing more.
Pawan, I would like to ask you about the impact of digitization on the procurement of public goods and services. Whenever contracts are bid for, the offer is made. How does this entire procurement system benefit from digitization?
Well, digitization has immensely benefited and completely transformed the procurement ecosystem. The reason for this is very clear. This government is focused on transparency, accountability, and responsibility. And all these three elements get a massive fillip by the digital ecosystem where it's no longer possible to go ahead and tamper electronic records, because if you do that, that becomes electronic forgery, punishable with imprisonment and fine. We also find that because the government is only now doing its tendering in the electronic format. We already have the government e-marketplace or GEM, where all the procurements are taking place. This is leading to savings which is worth crores of rupees on a daily basis. So that's massive. Further, this has also started to be a catalyst for encouraging the private stakeholders to increasingly only start using the electronic procurement as an effective and efficient mechanism for procurement purposes. So no wonder now everybody is increasingly looking at these various e-procurement portals, platforms, which are allowing the ability to cut through all the bureaucratic hassle, to cut all kind of delays, to make it more accountable, and to make it more transparent to all stakeholders who are engaging in the procurement ecosystem life cycle. So all said and done, we have done enough and pretty much a good job. But the government also needs to be complimented because this particular thing could not have been possible had the legal frameworks for electronic procurement not been in place. And that's where I think the Information Technology Act 2000 and the rules and regulations thereunder have played a very important, significant role in this regard. Going forward now with newly emerging technologies coming in, like artificial intelligence, blockchain, and Internet of Things, both the opportunities and challenges are going to explode phenomenally. And cybersecurity will continue to be an important challenge area. Why? Because cyber criminals have begun to start laughing all the way to the bank. The golden age of cybercrime has begun. So along with this remarkable work being done so far by the government, we need to do more in terms of protecting the cybersecurity of e-procurement systems, of information infrastructures, and critical information infrastructures. Fortunately, the government has come up with a very strong legal framework for protection of personal data under the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023. And hopefully now it's more got to be a question of trying to sensitize users to start adopting cyber resilience and cyber hygiene as part of their digital life skills and digital lifestyles as they move forward.
Maithili, let me just put the question to you now. How important are legal protections to inspire confidence in the economy of the payment system, in the digital economy?
Arjun, I think apart from the legal infrastructure, the fact is that in our country, as we all know, we have excellent laws, but implementation and awareness of these laws is also very limited. So I think just as we talk about financial literacy, I think we also need to talk in terms of digi-literacy. The problem today is that people forget what are the kind of, guardrails that they need to have, what are the kind of precautions they should have. You just don't click on any link that you see. So I think that's why I think government does have, there's a television program called DigiShala, which the ministry tried to launch. They also have some helplines. So people need to be sensitized that, look, whenever you have ease, it comes with a cost, which is why, in fact, the RBI has been very cautious. It's only in India that we have two-factor authentication. There are limits that you cannot, without that second level of authentication, you can't do large value transactions. And one of the biggest advantages I think that we have in India is that our digital infrastructure is in the public arena. So this is quite different from countries like China, where you have private platforms. So almost all our infrastructure is public infrastructure. So even if you have other applications like Google Pay, Phone Pay, Paytm, they all ride on the UPI UPI platform, and there's interoperability with different banks. So the fact that it is public infrastructure means that you can scale it up. You can keep adding apps to it. So that I think is a unique advantage that India has, that we've developed this in the public arena. And that makes a whole lot of difference as far as progress in India is concerned. But I do agree with Pawan that we need to sensitize people, improve digi-literacy along with financial literacy, and of course, the 3 Rs and ABC.
Pawan, how important is public awareness about these digi-tools for their benefit that is being carried out by the government of India? And what are the challenges really in making people aware?
Well, first and foremost, we need to appreciate that the government of India has adopted and demonstrated its distinctive thought leadership by coming up with a variety of digital tools, which are not just aimed in the direction of aiding electronic governance, but bringing governance to the doorstep of every citizen. Number two, these tools are very wide and diverse in their focus and in their coverage, as also their applicability and ambit. However, the fact remains is that far more capacity building is required to be done on these tools. For example, the government of India has now started using artificial intelligence on a variety of its tools. It's also got its massive tools, options on translations, and even using AI in different verticals like agriculture, business, and otherwise. So till such time, people are not sensitized about the benefits of these tools and how these tools can actually play in their lives, we are not going to see some much traction. And for that, appropriate allocation of budgets have to be put in only for capacity building. Just because COVID-19 came and everybody of us was forced to be on the digital highway does not mean that everybody is sensitized about either the availability of tools or the relevant, applicable legal policy or regulatory ramifications of activities that are done in the digital ecosystem. So for that, more capacity building is required to be done. And we can have these programs on television, on radio, on internet per se, because it's not just only about having tools. It's also about encouraging people to utilize these tools to have a transformative impact on their lives. So there, I think a lot of work needs to be done. Constant journey. Why? Because our figures are growing. It's 140 crores now. It's going to be much more a bit later. So every passing minute, new Indians are continuing to be born and adding to the population. So we have the youngest age population in the world. It's our onus as a nation that we should be making them more digitally literate, more cyber literate vis-a-vis their cyber habits, cyber hygiene, and cyber methodologies. And finally, I think Indians need to be made sensitive to the fact that they must start now using the positive energies of the Indian Jugaad school of management to find out the constructive uses of these new tools, which can help them transform their lives.
Maithili, I would like to ask you about, the market capitalization of Sensex and Nifty is telling us $4.7 trillion based on current valuations. And whenever we talk about the digital economy, we're talking about productivity, we're talking about size and the valuation of it. How do you see the GDP of India in terms of valuation because of the digitization initiatives?
Well, that really is the hope that the digital economy itself will help us reach that magic figure of $5 trillion much faster than we had anticipated. It is estimated. In fact, I think there are some reports which says that the digital economy itself will total $1 trillion by 2020. And that's a huge amount. And that will empower the entire economy, power it along, drive it along, and help us reach that long-cherished goal. We're already the 5th largest economy in the world. And with a little bit of luck and help from the digital economy, it won't be long before we become the 3rd largest, 2nd largest, and who knows, maybe one day the largest economy in the world.
Maithili, to what extent do you see the black economy and Benami transactions being reduced, its impact being greatly reduced as a result of digitization?
Well, I'm very hopeful of that, because though the black economy will never disappear entirely, it's there in every part of the world. The fact is that because when a digital economy, the biggest benefit really is that it's transparent and it leaves a clear audit trail. So it is very difficult, as you will see in real estate. In fact, the number of Benami transactions has come down, black money has come down. By and large, real estate, which is one hotbed where we had a lot of corruption, that is one area that I think is going to become much, much cleaner, going to become very difficult for people to hide. In fact, the biggest benefit really of the digital program is in terms of financial inclusion. As far as social benefits, the entire advantage of a digital public infrastructure is that because you're able to extend social services to a large but vast majority of the population to which you could not reach at all. In fact, according to a World Bank report, India's digital public infrastructure has propelled the financial inclusion rate, and I quote, from 25% to over 80% in just 6 years. All this has become possible only because of the digital revolution. So as far as Benami transactions, black money transactions are concerned, these will also be dramatically reduced entirely because of greater transparency of the digital economy.
And Mithili, what about tax avoidance and tax evasion? And what are the type of collaborations that we have with international organizations and other countries to reduce its impact?
Well, yes. In fact, as far as international cooperation is concerned, with Singapore, it's already been very fascinated by our UPI. So we already have an agreement with UPI. Foreigners who are coming into India are now able to use, UPI to make transactions in India. In fact, recently, after the visit of President Macron on 26th of January, we just signed an agreement with the French counterpart, and UPI. If you now want to visit the Eiffel Tower, I believe you can make a payment through UPI. So that's the kind of collaboration that is possible. So I think the sky is the limit, really. But as Pavan said, you need to ensure proper safeguards. You need to ensure that people are sufficiently educated and told about what are the kind of precautions they should take and what are the kind of disclosures that they should make. Do not disclose any personal information. Do not click on any unauthorized links. So I think this will go hand in hand. But clearly the days come when it will soon be a case where cash becomes a very minuscule part of the entire economy, and we virtually digital and paperless, as it were, faceless, paperless, and whatever else the government wanted, really, as far as the digital economy is concerned.
Pavanji, I would like to conclude by asking you about the applications of digitization beyond tax collection and making real estate payments that we're seeing right now, making your advance payments and then the full payment itself. What are the other areas that you see digitization being targeted by the Government of India?
The Government of India is focused on a holistic adoption of the digital tools and digital technologies. So there's hardly going to be any area of human activity and endeavor that is going to remain untouched by the advent of these digital technologies and digital tools. Of course, I can tell you from the perspective of judiciary, the government has already now committed more than many 100 crore rupees for modernization of the judiciary, for making judgments of the Supreme Court and the High Courts available in 15 Indian languages, apart from help facilitating access to justice in a very expeditious, transparent manner to the citizens of the country. Further, I expect that with these newly emerging technologies coming in, whether it's artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things coming in, the government is soon going to dovetail its tools so as to incorporate therein these newly emerging technologies so that the benefits of technologies can be handed over through a democratization process to the Indian citizens at large, and ultimately making them far more empowered. Once the Indian citizens are far more empowered, they can themselves contribute in the direction of making the Indian nation far more strong and resilient. And of course, capacity building will have to be constantly be made an integral part of our lives. I've been arguing for the last many years that it's time that you start inculcating and start initiating cyber law and cyber security education in the school curriculum from the first standard onwards. This is so because today Indians at a very young age have started accessing these kinds of devices without themselves being prepared.
Well, thank you so much, Maithili ji and Pavan Duggal ji, for being with us on this program and discussing at length the government's efforts for a rapid growth of the digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjun.
You were listening to a discussion on government's efforts for rapid growth of digital economy. The participants were Maithili Bhusnurmat, economic analyst, and Dr. Pavan Duggal, IT expert. Moderator, Arjun J. Chowdhury. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.
ये है